There is a specific kind of person who ends a day mentally exhausted, without having done anything that justifies the exhaustion. They wake up with intention. Today will be different. There's clarity in the morning, a brief surge of control. They open a laptop. They sit down. They know exactly what needs to be done. And then something almost invisible happens. A small tension, not dramatic, just enough discomfort to hesitate. The task feels heavy, not impossible, just exposing. So the brain looks for relief. Let me check something quickly. The phone lights up. A notification, a message, a short video. Dopamine arrives instantly. No resistance, no evaluation, no risk of being bad at it. Just stimulation. 10 minutes pass, then 20, then 40. Now there's a new emotion, guilt, and guilt is uncomfortable. So instead of returning to the task calmly, the mind does something smarter. It fantasizes. It imagines doing the task perfectly tomorrow, starting fresh, with better focus, with more energy, with a cleaner plan. The fantasy feels productive. It restores self-image. You're not lazy. You're just resetting. The day continues like this. Micro discomfort, micro escape, micro guilt, micro fantasy. By the end of the day, you are tired, not from effort, from internal negotiation. And here's the part that matters. You are not short on ambition. In fact, your ambition is intense. You don't want a small life. You don't want mediocrity. You think long-term. You think in years. You think in potential. That's why this cycle is so frustrating. Because your mind operates at a higher level than your behavior. You understand discipline intellectually. You understand delayed gratification. You understand dopamine loops. And yet, understanding does not translate into execution. This is where most people misdiagnose themselves. They think the problem is distraction, but distraction is just a tool. The real issue is exposure. When you open social media, nothing is demanded from you. You consume, you react, you move on. No output, no measurement, no evidence of ability. When you open your real work, the opposite happens. Now there will be proof. Proof of skill, or proof of lack of it. Proof of focus, or proof of inconsistency. Proof removes imagination, and imagination is comfortable. Scrolling keeps you in stimulation. Work forces you into evaluation. The brain prefers stimulation, especially when the alternative threatens identity. Because here's what makes ambitious but inactive people different. Their self-image is built around potential. I could do something big. I'm capable of more. I just haven't fully applied myself yet. That sentence protects you. Because as long as you haven't fully applied yourself, the verdict is still pending. You remain undefined. Undefined potential feels powerful. Defined performance feels risky. So your days remain open-ended, flexible. You'll work when you feel sharp. You'll start when you feel clear. You'll commit when the plan feels perfect. But perfection never arrives. Because clarity is not a precondition for action. It is a result of it. And while you wait for the perfect internal state, your phone provides a perfect external escape. Endless novelty, endless comparison, endless micro rewards. Each scroll gives you a tiny hit of progress-like sensation, new information, new idea, new strategy. It feels like movement, but nothing accumulates. At night, the contrast sharpens. You think about who you want to become. Then you review who you were today. The gap is quiet, but heavy, and the more ambitious your future image becomes, the more uncomfortable your present behavior feels. So you protect the image. You tell yourself you're early. You tell yourself you're refining. You tell yourself you're observing before acting. But days are passing, and your evidence is not increasing. This is not laziness. It is unstructured ambition colliding with immediate dopamine. It is identity avoiding measurement. It is potential staying theoretical. And the longer this continues, the harder it becomes to trust yourself. Because every postponed action sends a signal, not to the world, to you. And once self-trust begins to erode, the problem becomes deeper than procrastination. Once self-trust starts to erode, something shifts internally. You become more hesitant, not because you don't want success, but because each attempt now carries more weight. When you sit down to work, it's no longer just about the task. It's about proving something, proving you can focus, proving you're disciplined, proving you're not wasting your potential. The task becomes symbolic, and symbolic tasks feel heavier than practical ones. If you write one bad page, it's not just a bad page. It feels like evidence. If you struggle to concentrate for 30 minutes, it's not just distraction. It feels like confirmation. I knew it. So you avoid creating evidence at all. Because no evidence means no verdict. This is where ambition becomes fragile. From the outside, ambition looks confident. Internally, it can be extremely sensitive. Sensitive to judgment, sensitive to comparison, sensitive to measurable results. And modern life amplifies this. You don't just work in isolation. You work in an environment where everyone displays outcomes, metrics, milestones, announcements. You scroll and see people shipping, building, publishing. You compare their visible results to your invisible preparation, and the comparison is unfair. But your brain doesn't care. It just registers distance. Distance creates pressure. Pressure increases avoidance. Avoidance increases distance. Now the cycle is reinforced. But underneath all of this is something more uncomfortable. Pride. You don't want to be bad at something you care about. You don't want to start at zero publicly. You don't want to be seen trying and struggling. It's easy to delay and preserve the image of being capable but undiscovered. There is safety in being underestimated because you never fully showed up. There is risk in showing up and being ordinary. So you tell yourself you're waiting for the right moment. But what you're actually waiting for is emotional certainty. Certainty that you will perform well. Certainty that effort will pay off. Certainty that you won't embarrass yourself. Certainty rarely arrives before action. It usually follows repetition. But repetition requires tolerating imperfection. And imperfection feels like identity damage when your self-image is built on potential. So resistance becomes intelligent. It doesn't say, don't try. It says, refine the plan first. Learn a little more. Organize your system. Start next week when things are calmer. It sounds reasonable. It sounds mature. It sounds strategic. But it consistently postpones exposure. Here's the deeper conflict. You don't fear work. You fear recalibration. Because once you fully commit to something and give it real effort, one of two things will happen. You'll either succeed slowly, or you'll confront your current limits. Both require adjustment. Adjustment requires humility. Humility requires letting go of the inflated version of yourself. And that feels like loss. So you maintain an inflated internal standard, but reduce actual output. This protects ego in the short term, but increases anxiety in the long term. Because the mind cannot indefinitely ignore contradiction. You say you want more. Your behavior says you want safety. Eventually, the internal narrative starts splitting. One voice says, you're meant for more. Another voice says, look at your track record. This internal division drains energy, not because of the tasks themselves, but because of unresolved identity conflict. You are trying to preserve a self-concept while avoiding behaviors that would either validate or update it. And updating identity is uncomfortable. It requires data. Data requires exposure. Exposure requires courage, not dramatic courage. Quiet courage. The kind that tolerates being unimpressive for a while. That is the threshold most ambitious but inactive people resist. Not consciously, but consistently. And until that resistance is addressed, discipline strategies won't stick. Productivity systems won't fix it. Deleting apps won't solve it, because the phone is not the root. It is just the nearest exit. The real question is this: are you willing to let reality inform your identity? Or will you continue protecting who you imagine you are? That tension is where change either begins or keeps getting postponed. That tension exists for a reason. It's not random. It's biological. Because when reality threatens your imagined identity, your brain looks for relief. Not truth, relief. And relief is always closer than progress. There's something most ambitious people never realize. You are not addicted to scrolling. You are addicted to certainty. Social media doesn't win because it's entertaining. It wins because it guarantees a shift in your state. Effort does not guarantee reward. You can work for 2 hours and feel stuck. You can scroll for 2 minutes and feel stimulated. Your nervous system learns quickly. It doesn't ask, what builds my future? It asks, what reliably changes how I feel right now? Scrolling answers immediately. Work answers eventually. And when the reward is delayed, your brain interprets uncertainty as threat. So it reaches for the nearest exit. Not because you're weak, but because your system prefers guaranteed resolution over uncertain growth. And here's the uncomfortable part. The more ambitious you are, the more vulnerable you become to this pattern, because the bigger the vision, the longer the reward timeline. If your goal is small, feedback is fast. If your goal is meaningful, feedback is delayed. And delayed feedback destabilizes identity. Now you're not just fighting distraction. You're fighting distance. So the solution is not intensity, it's repair, and repair is quiet. Most ambitious people try to compensate with force. New routine, new rules, big declarations. It works for 3 days, then collapses, because self-trust is not rebuilt through pressure. It is rebuilt through kept promises. Small ones, specific ones, unimpressive ones. You are not trying to become disciplined. You are trying to redesign reinforcement. Shorten the feedback loop, not the dream. The loop, build a business, is abstract. Complete page 1 is concrete. Fix my life is overwhelming. Work for 25 minutes on section 1 is executable. Completion creates closure. Closure produces dopamine. Now effort competes. This is the rewire. Instead of asking, how do I become consistent? Ask, what is one action I will complete today, even if it's mediocre? Not plan, complete. If you've been avoiding writing, write 1 paragraph and stop. If you've been avoiding the gym, go for 20 minutes and leave. If you've been avoiding publishing, post something functional but imperfect. The size matters less than the evidence, because what you are rebuilding is not productivity. It is credibility with yourself. And credibility is built through repetition. At first, your mind will resist small actions. This is too little. It won't matter. That's not ambitious. That voice is ego protecting scale. Ignore it. You are not shrinking your ambition. You are separating it from today. Ambition stays long-term. Today stays small. When pressure decreases, avoidance decreases, then something subtle shifts. You stop sitting down to prove you are exceptional. You sit down to complete a defined unit. Defined units reduce emotional weight. Abstract goals create paralysis. Concrete tasks create movement. Movement creates evidence. Evidence updates identity. Identity stabilizes behavior. That is the loop you want. Not dopamine, guilt, fantasy. But action, completion, evidence, confidence. It will feel boring. That's normal. Boredom is your nervous system recalibrating from constant stimulation to sustainable effort. Do not confuse boredom with misalignment. It is adaptation. There will be imperfect outputs. They won't match the image in your head. That gap is not failure. It is calibration. Each imperfect action reduces fantasy. Less fantasy means less intimidation. Less intimidation means less avoidance. And slowly, not dramatically, you begin starting tasks without negotiation. Not because you became hypermotivated, but because the task is no longer symbolic. It's procedural. You're not validating your identity every time you work. You're executing a unit. And here's the shift most people never reach. Discipline does not create confidence. Predictable self-generated completion does. When your brain learns, if I act, I complete. If I complete, I feel resolution. It stops seeking resolution and scrolling. Scrolling is borrowed stimulation. Completion is earned stimulation. Borrowed stimulation feels intense, but empty. Earned stimulation feels quiet, but stable. And stability is what ambitious people are actually craving, not intensity. Stability. Over time, your ambition becomes calmer, less theatrical, less dramatic, more grounded. You stop imagining who you could become, because you are observing who you are becoming, quietly, through repeated evidence. The phone loses some of its grip, not because dopamine disappeared, but because progress now generates its own reinforcement. And eventually your internal narrative changes from, I could do something big, to, I did what I said I would do today. That sentence sounds small. It isn't. It is self-respect. Ambition without structure feels powerful, but unstable. Structure without drama feels ordinary, but effective. The conflict doesn't resolve through motivation. It resolves through alignment. And alignment is quiet, almost invisible from the outside, but internally, it feels like relief. Because your imagined future and your documented present are no longer enemies. They are connected. And maybe nothing dramatic happens tomorrow. You won't wake up transformed. You won't suddenly love discipline. You probably won't feel inspired. But you will have a choice. A small one, unimpressive, invisible to everyone else. When the moment comes, when your hand reaches for the phone, when your mind starts negotiating, when you feel that familiar pull toward relief, you'll remember this. You're not fighting laziness. You're choosing which version of reinforcement shapes you. Borrowed stimulation, or earned stability, fantasy, or evidence. And the shift won't look powerful. It will look quiet. You'll close one tab, open one document, set a timer, finish a small unit. And that's it. No announcement, no reinvention, just a kept promise. And if you repeat that long enough, something irreversible begins. You stop imagining who you could become because you trust who you are becoming. Not loudly, not publicly, but consistently. Ambition stops feeling like pressure. It starts feeling like alignment. And one day you realize you no longer need motivation to begin because beginning is no longer a threat to your identity. It's proof of it. The phone is still there. The distractions still exist, but they're no longer your exit. They're just options, and you don't need them as often anymore because for the first time, progress feels more regulating than escape. That's when everything changes. Quietly,